Hey, everybody. Kind of got down to the end of the day and had a little extra time. I thought maybe I would read another part of a chapter, our next chapter of Waking the Dead. And I'm in the living room. Actually, I'm in the dining room, which is next to the living room. But I came in here because I thought, this is the last week that we'll have um our Christmas decorations up. So next week they'll come down. And anyway, I just wanted to enjoy the lights behind me and the rest of the decorations around the living room. And so I'm going to turn my phone down so that we don't get disturbed. And I'm not promising that Stanley or Robert won't come up here and jump in the middle of our reading here today. So we may get interrupted and hopefully not. And we'll see. So let's pick up. I think we left off at part 3, beginning preface of chapter 6. So here we go. This is entitled, part 3 is entitled The Four Streams. Did you feel the darkness tremble when all the saints joined in one song? And all the streams flow as one river to wash away our brokenness. Martin Smith, did you feel the mountains tremble? From Eden, a river flowed to water the park, which, on leaving the park, branched into 4 streams. Genesis chapter 2, the Moffatt translation. In the garden known as Eden, there was a spring issuing from the depths of the earth. This fount became the headwaters of a mighty river, which in turn parted into 4 great streams. St. Bonaventure saw in that a foreshadowing, a mythic symbol of an ever-flowing fountain, as he called it, that becomes a great and living river with 4 channels to water the garden of the entire church. I think if you'll look again at the ways in which Christ ransoms people, the means by which he makes a man or a woman come fully alive, you'll find he offers his life to us through 4 streams. Those streams are discipleship, counseling, healing, and warfare. Terms might sound familiar, but for so many of us, they are familiar in the way that we've heard Saturn has rings around it, or that Antarctica is a frozen continent. Our actual experience of the 4 streams is not what it could be. If it were, we would be the glorious ones by now in Psalm 16. It'll help to think of them as walking with God, receiving God's intimate counsel, deep restoration, and spiritual warfare. Long have these streams been separated. I imagine we've sipped from only 1 or 2. Now is the time for them to flow together again. That is how our glory is restored, how we find the life of Christ, find the life that Christ offers, how we live in his story. To discover for yourself that the glory of God is man fully alive, you must drink deeply from the 4 streams that Christ sends to you. Chapter 6, Walking with God. Narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Jesus, from Matthew 7. You've made it known to me the path of life. King David, from Psalm 6. After the road had run down some way and had left Bree Hill standing tall and brown behind, they came on a narrow track that led off towards the north. This is where we leave the open road and take to cover, said Strider. Not a shortcut, I hope, said Pippin, Our last shortcut through the woods nearly ended in disaster. Ah, but you had not got me with you then, laughed Strider. My cuts, short or long, don't go wrong. He took a look up and down the road, and no one was in sight, and he led the way quickly down towards the wooded valley. Strider guided them confidently among the many crossing paths, although, left to themselves, they would soon have been at a loss. He was taking a wandering course with many turns and doublings to put off any pursuit. Whether because of Strider's skill or for some other reason, they saw no sign and heard no sound of any other living thing all that day. They had not gone far on the fifth day when they left the last straggling pools and reed beds of the marshes behind them. The land before them began steadily to rise again, and away in the distance eastward, they could now see the line of hills. The highest of them was at the right of the line and a little separated from the others. It had a conical top, slightly flattened at the summit. That is Weathertop, said Strider. They stood for a while silent on the hilltop near its southern edge. In that lonely place, Frodo, for the first time, fully realized his homelessness and danger. He wished bitterly that his fortune had left him in the quiet and beloved Shire. He stared down at the hateful road leading back westward to his home, and suddenly he was aware that two black specks were moving slowly along it, going westward. And looking again, he saw that three others were creeping eastward to meet them. He gave a cry and clutched Strider's arm. Look, he said, pointing downwards. At once, Strider flung himself on the ground behind the ruined circle, pulling Frodo down beside him. Merry threw himself alongside. Slowly, they crawled up to the edge of the ring again and peered through the cleft between two jagged stones. The light was no longer bright, for the clear morning had faded. Neither Frodo nor Merry could make out the shapes for certain, yet something told him that they were there. Far below were black riders assembling on the road beyond the foot of the hill. Yes, said Strider, whose keener sight left him no doubt. The enemy is here. J.R.R. Tolkien, The Fellowship of the Ring. Guided. I was downstairs early one Tuesday morning in September, a cold and foggy morning, with a blanket wrapped around me as I read, trying to capture some moments with God before the whirlwind of the day swept upon me, when I came across a passage on forgiveness. Now, I think you'll know what I mean when I say it seemed to speak louder or more clearly than everything else I had been reading. I could not pass on. I tried to, but I sensed that the Spirit of God was saying, go back to that passage, linger there. I tried to read ahead, but everything after that was stale. I went back and read the passage over. There it was again, that tang, that prompt, that sense of, this is what I want you to pay attention to. The passage was warning about the dangers of an unforgiving heart, how damaging it can be. Am I an unforgiving person, Lord? Is that what you're trying to say? No. I'm warning you. Remember this. You are going to need to be forgiving. In less than an hour, I received a call that can only be described in terms of betrayal. It was devastating, Some allies we had asked to help us with a project very dear to us announced that they were quitting, changing horses midstream, walking away from battle just as it was getting hot. I was stunned, speechless. It was so out of the blue, so unlike them. I didn't know what to say. The injury was doubled by an attempt to fix the blame on us. It was because of your attitudes that they had chosen. It was because of our attitudes that they had chosen to abandon ship. Dumbfounded, blindsided, I knew this much. This cannot bring happiness to God. I asked if there was no other way to make amends. No. Was there anything we could do to patch things up? No. As I probed the matter further, earnestly seeking a way to rebuild the friendship, their story grew increasingly thin and contradictory. They were walking away, period. And it was our fault. As the news settled in, I wanted to get angry. I was hurt, run through with a sword. Then, like some wolf in the night sniffing at my door, I could feel resentment trying to get in. After all, it seemed a completely justifiable response. Just as I was lifting the latch, I remembered the Lord's warning. Oh, this is what you meant. Forgive. I barred the door, refused to let resentment in. 10 minutes later, as our conversation continued the way of the Paris peace talks, something else came scrounging for admittance. I was tempted to turn to self-reproach, even though I really didn't think we'd done anything to earn such a betrayal. I was willing to own it nonetheless. No, this is not your fault. Simply forgive them. After more than an hour, the conversation was clearly at an impasse. Their position was making me madder than ever. I wanted to go to pride. We were clearly in the right. No, do not turn to pride. Simply forgive them. I hung up the phone, exhausted. Then I had to call a number of closely involved parties and do my best to give a gracious and impartial account of what happened, trying to honor their stated reasons, trying to own our part in the divorce. Each new conversation brought another round of emotion. Betrayal with it anger, hurt, resentment, indignation, false guilt, the whole nasty menagerie, like a pack of hungry coyotes circling the camp. Simply forgive them. Bar the door. Every other emotion, every other reaction felt dangerous, loaded with some further evil. Falling into bed that night, I felt as though I'd been guided by some wise ranger like Aragorn through a dark forest with 100 wrong turns at every side. I felt rescued. My journals are full of such stories. There must be hundreds, maybe close to 1,000 by now. God has got me out of all sorts of tight spots, saved my life more than once, literally. He's also guided me into all sorts of beautiful surprises and adventures. Now, it could be that I'm just a slow learner, and God is being especially gracious to a man who needs a little extra help. Lord knows I do. But I don't think he speaks to me any more than others. I think I've just learned to expect it, need it, keep an eye out for it. It's a whole different perspective on how we approach our day. Either we wait to tackle our to-do list, get things done, guided by our morals and whatever clarity we may at the moment have, Robert's about to join the reading club. Right, go lay down. He's going to bump the computer, I know it. Let's see, where were we? Whatever clarity we may at the moment have, both rather lacking to the need, I might add, or we wake in the midst of dangerous story as God's intimate ally, following him into the unknown. If you're not pursuing a dangerous quest with your life, well, then you don't need a guide. If you haven't found yourself in the midst of a ferocious war, then you won't need a seasoned captain. If you've settled in your mind to live as though this is a fairly neutral world and you're simply trying to live your life as best you can, then you can probably get by with the Christianity of tips and techniques. Maybe. I'll give you about 50-50 chance. But if you intend to live the story that God is telling, and if you want the part he offers, then you're going to need more than a handful of principles, however noble they may be. There are too many twists and turns in the road ahead, too many ambushes waiting only God knows where, too much at stake. You cannot possibly prepare yourself for every situation. Narrow is the way, Jesus said. How shall we be sure to find it? We need God intimately, and we need him desperately. You have made known to me the path of life, David said in Psalm 16. Yes, that's it. In all the ins and outs of this thing we call living, there is one narrow path of life. We need help finding it. What is discipleship? On the other hand, there is what we've come to accept as discipleship. A friend of mine recently handed me a program from a large and successful church somewhere in the Midwest. It's a rather exemplary model of what the idea has fallen to. Their plan for discipleship involves first becoming a member of this particular church. Then they encourage you to take a course on doctrine. Be faithful in attending the Sunday morning service and the small group fellowship. Complete a special course on Christian growth. Live a life that demonstrates a clear evidence of spiritual growth. Complete a class on evangelism. Consistently look for opportunities to evangelize. Complete a course on finances, one on marriage and another on parenting, provided that you are married or a parent. Complete a leadership training course and a hermeneutics course and a course on spiritual gifts and another on biblical counseling. Participate in missions. Carry a significant local church ministry load. You're probably surprised that I would question this sort of program. Most churches are trying to get their folks to complete something like this, one way or another. No doubt a great deal of helpful information is passed on. My goodness, you could earn an MBA with less effort. That's a master's of business. FYI. You can earn a master's of business degree with less effort. But let me ask you, a program like this, does it teach a person how to apply principles or how to walk with God? They're not the same thing. Changing the content, and any cult could do this. I mean, Gandhi was a remarkable man. So was Lao Tzu, Confucius, or Thomas Jefferson. They all had principles for a better life, but only Christianity can teach you to walk with God. We forfeit that birthright when we take folks through a discipleship program whereby they master any number of Christian precepts and miss the most important thing of all. The very thing for which they were created, intimacy with with God. There are, after all, these troubling words Jesus spoke to those who were doing all the right things. Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Matthew 7. Knowing God, that's the point. You might recall the old proverb, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. The same holds true here. Teach a man a rule and you help him solve a problem. Teach a man to walk with God and you help him solve the rest of his life. Truth be told, you couldn't master enough principles to see you safely through this story. There are too many surprises, ambiguities, exceptions to the rule. Things are hard at work. Is it time to make a move? What has God called you to do with your life? Things are hard at home. Is this just a phase your son is going through, or should you be more concerned? You can't seem to shake this depression. Is it medical or something darker? What does the future hold for you? How should you respond? Only by walking with God can we hope to find the path that leads to life. That is, what it means to be a disciple. After all, aren't we followers of Christ? Then by all means, let's actually follow him. Not ideas about him, not just principles, but him. By wisdom. A personal walk with God comes to us through wisdom and revelation. You'll soon discover that we need both. For a moment, the king's grief and anger were so great that he couldn't speak. Then he said, come, friends, we must go up the river and find the villains who've done this. With all the speed we may. We will not leave one of them alive. Sire, with good will, said Jewel. But Runlet said, Sire, be wary in your just wrath. There are strange doings afoot. If there should be rebels in arms further up the valley, we three are too few to meet them. If it would please you to wait a while. I will not wait the 10th part of a second, said the king. But while Jewel and I go forward, do you gallop as hard as you may to Cair Paravel? We may go on and take the adventure that comes to us. It is the only thing left for us to do, sire, said the unicorn. We did not see at the moment how foolish it was for two of them to go on alone. Nor did the king. They were too angry to think clearly. But much evil came of their rashness in the end. C.S. Lewis, The Last Battle. King Tyrion of Narnia has a good heart, but he also has an unwise heart, an untrained heart. I'd say that's true for most of us. Our heart has been made good by the work of Christ, but we haven't learned how to live from it. Young and naive it remains. It is as though we've been handed a golden harp or a shining sword, and even the most gifted musician still has to take lessons. Even the bravest of warriors must be trained. We're unfamiliar, unpracticed with the way of the heart. This is actually a very dangerous part of the journey. Launching out into an untrained heart with an untrained heart can bring such hurt and ruin, and afterward we'll be shamed back into the gospel of sin management. Having concluded that our heart is bad, it isn't bad. It's just young and unwise. The poet George Herbert warned, go not abroad at every quest or call of an untrained hope or passion. When the apostles needed the help of some good men to shepherd an exploding the exploding new church, they chose men full of the Spirit and with wisdom. The two go together. We need both. We need to walk by the inspiration of the Spirit. We need wisdom as well, wisdom and revelation. Early on in our journey, I think we should learn more, lean more into wisdom. It takes time to learn to walk with God in a deeply intimate way, and many challenges face us before we're accustomed to the way of the heart. We must practice our chords. We must do our drills. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease without fear of harm. Then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. And knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you. Proverbs 1:32-33, Proverbs 2:9-11. A friend of mine wanted to teach English as a second language in an Asian country as a way of becoming sort of an undercover missionary. A beautiful dream, one that I'm sure she would have been excellent in fulfilling. But she rushed to the field unprepared in many ways. I don't mean finances or language skills. I mean in the ways of the heart. Lurking down in her soul were some deep and unresolved issues that would set her up for a fall. Among them, shame and guilt from an abusive past. The team she joined was totally unfamiliar with the new heart, and they doubted its goodness. As with too many Christian ministries, shame and guilt were often used as motivators. Their old covenant theology would play right into Susan's issues, shut down her young heart, and finally, she was unpracticed in spiritual warfare, ill-equipped for what hell would throw at her. The devil is a master at the shame and guilt game. She went. She got hammered. She came home defeated. Her friends wonder if she'll ever try it again. The disaster could have been avoided. Wisdom was crying out, "Do not rush the field." Luke 14. Train yourself to discern good and evil. Hebrews 5. Live as though your life is at stake and the enemy is waiting to outwit you. Matthew 10. God has given us all sorts of counsel and direction in his written word. Thank God we have it written down in black and white. We would do well to be familiar with it, study it, and with all the intensity of the men who studied the maps of the Normandy coastline before they hit the beaches on D-Day. That was the invasion of France in the 1940s during World War II. I think you call it something different. D-Day was the invasion day. The more that wisdom enters your hearts, the more we will be able to trust our hearts in difficult situations. Notice that wisdom is not cramming our heads with principles. It is developing a discerning heart. What made Solomon such a sharp guy was his wise and discerning heart. 1 Kings chapter 3. We don't seek wisdom because it's a good idea. We seek wisdom because we're dead if we don't. We seek wisdom because the trail is narrow and hard to find. It's a cruel thing to tell someone to follow their dreams without also warning her what hell will come against her. High school and college commencement speeches are full of such naivety. Reach for the stars, follow your dreams, find yourself. It's not that the advice is bad. It is, however, woefully inadequate. It's like a 13-year-old falling in love. Her motives may be lovely, but she's in for a painful fall. Will she ever love again with such abandon? I'm going to stop there today, and we'll finish up the second half of chapter 6, and it begins with revelation, which is the next key in this chapter. And we'll finish that up maybe tomorrow or the next day. I hope you have a great evening. I hope by now you are fast asleep and resting well. And I'll be praying over your rest this evening as you sleep. And I always do, because rest is so essential to being able to fight spiritually and physically all that you're facing. And I love you guys. I think about you often, each and every one of you. And I hope that you're enjoying and getting something out of these readings. So we'll just continue till we finish the book. Have a great evening and have a great day.